just for the people that don't know who you are. Who are you and what is your background?
I am Luisa Vargas. As in like academic background or
Academic
like sport?
and also sport background, yeah.
Okay, so I did my undergrad in sports science. Before that, I played football for 10 years, and then I went to university, stopped playing football, got really into the gym, got into bodybuilding, prepped for a show, didn't do that show, started powerlifting 2 years later in my final year of university. After I started powerlifting, I started my master's in applied sports psychology, and now I've finished my master's 2 months ago, still powerlifting, looking for a PhD, working on my master's dissertation to try and get it published. That's where I am at the moment.
Okay. So when did you start bodybuilding, and how come you didn't go with the competition after you've just prepped for it?
So I got into bodybuilding because when I stopped playing football, I just started going to the gym, just to kind of like look better, I guess, but I didn't really know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And then I met a personal trainer there, and they just got me into like lifting weights. And then like on Instagram, like everyone that was lifting weights was really into like doing bikini shows for some reason. So I started doing that, and like because everyone was like into that on social media, I thought, oh, I'll prep for a show, like it'll be easy, and it wasn't. I like just dieted really hard and trained really hard, and I was a few weeks out from the show, and then I just decided that I almost came to the realization that I'd have to be like half naked on stage in front of like complete strangers and have like a random man judge my half naked body in front of like thousands of spectators, and I just thought like that's not me at all. And like I just thought like I just didn't want to do that. I just didn't want to diet and like train like that. It just wasn't fun, and I just stopped doing that and just started training more for strength. And I didn't even know what powerlifting was. I was just in the gym like training for strength, just squatting and deadlifting all the time and trying to max out all the time, which wasn't an efficient way of training, but I liked it anyway, and I tried to do that anyway. And then I found the university strength team, which was powerlifting and weightlifting. And originally, like, I started doing both weightlifting and powerlifting, but like slowly just transitioned into just powerlifting, because it's fun and you get to like test your body and like push it to a limit that you didn't think you'd be able to. It's fun.
Okay. And so you were saying about your master's dis anyway, so what was that? So what was your research topic for your master's?
So, being involved in powerlifting, like I was like hearing about people that had like a really hard time like cutting weight for competitions, and like people would like joke about like almost like disordered eating. That's what it was like. And because I had gone through that as well, I thought like this is like a real thing in this sport. Like people have fucked up issues with food, and I don't know if it's the sport that was necessarily causing it, or if it's like they've had issues from the past, or like I don't know. It was just, I just thought it was like a really interesting topic. Like, so I had a background with eating disorder, so I was like really interested in it, and I was like going through recovery at the time, and like it was just a super interesting topic for me. And then knowing that it kind of existed in the sport but no one really like talked about it, I kind of wanted to explore that more and see like if it was just a select few people that were kind of going through it, or like if it was this huge thing, or like I wanted to hear like stories from people that were potentially going through disordered eating. And I didn't necessarily want to find like negative things, I just wanted to find out people's experiences in general, because a lot of people, they go through these kind of disordered eating patterns when they cut weight for like a competition to get into their weight class. And I thought, oh, maybe they don't necessarily have a negative time or experience with it. Maybe they just kind of do it for the purpose of getting into their weight class, and then after that it's fine, like there's no effects, like they're completely fine with it. But then I thought maybe there's other people that do that, but then they have like a much harder time, like off season, and experience really like harmful, negative psychological effects. And that's kind of what I wanted to explore. I wanted to hear about all these kind of different stories, and kind of selfishly, I guess, I wanted to know that maybe it wasn't just me that was experiencing like a hard time. Maybe there was like similar kind of stories to mine, or completely different. But yeah, it was just super interesting to me, so I kind of just explored that and stuck with it and worked really hard on it, and still working on it today. And I think it helps that I'm involved in the sport, because getting it out there was like really good, because I'm involved in the sport. When I shared it, because I know a lot of people in the sport and they know me through the sport, like it was just easier to spread that to different people, because they could spread it with other people who follow them. And yeah, it was good being involved in that already.
Okay, so how come you thought that how come there's not as much research into it then? Because you were saying that you haven't really heard of other people's accounts. It's more like, or like anecdotal, so like hearsay, what goes around. But how come, or why do you think that there's not any research really into it, even if it might be like a pressing thing?
In terms of like academic research, I think a lot of like research focuses on sports that traditionally there's eating issues in. So for example, like stuff like where you need to look really good to be in that sport. So things like dancers, like ballet dancers, like figure skaters, like gymnastics, where you need to be quite lean and petite to be really good at your sport, or like bodybuilding, where you need to be like completely naked and you need to look a certain way to do well in your sport. Like sports like that, they are kind of looked at in research because the goal of your sport is to look a certain way. Whereas a sport like powerlifting, where the goal is lift as much weight as possible. Oh, sorry, my laptop's doing something for me. Okay, where the goal of the sport is lift as much weight as possible, focus on your strength. Like, who cares about what you look like? Like, that's not the aim of the sport. So I thought, like, there's no research in those kind of power and strength sports because they haven't been identified as like at risk, I guess. And there is some research in like weight class sports, but never on like a power sport. And I think like the one study that I found was like it was like looking at loads of different sports, and they had one power athlete, and it was like a quantitative study, so they were looking at like, they gave out questionnaires and stuff, and that one power athlete, I think they didn't report an eating disorder. But yeah, like a lot of research in weight class sports has been using questionnaires, and a lot of their population are clinically diagnosed, so they meet all this criteria. So they meet a criteria for either like bulimia nervosa, anorexia nervosa, whereas I thought maybe there's a population who suffer with a mild version of it, which is what I term like disordered eating. Like it's a mild version of an eating disorder. So you meet some of the criteria, but not all of it. So I thought like research has like, they've missed this entire population that could be like struggling an issue. And I wanted to explore that because I knew it existed. And just because this population hadn't been identified in research as at risk didn't mean that they weren't. So yeah, I think research hasn't focused on it because I guess they thought it hasn't been needed. But I think like the way that I did it, so through like qualitative means, so like interviews and stuff, are really, really important, because I was looking at like the pathology, so like thoughts, feelings, emotions, behaviours, like surrounding kind of the eating and stuff, and like body image, whereas the objective type stuff that had been done in the past, so like using like questionnaire results and stuff, that doesn't reveal very much. So like, yeah, someone's got an eating disorder, but why do they go through these things? Like, how does it emerge? Like, that shit's really important, and like the stories and stuff, like, and I think that's a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a shame that I guess research hasn't looked at that before, but I guess that left scope for me to kind of investigate further in sport like powerlifting, using a population that weren't necessarily clinically diagnosed but had still gone through really like potentially fucked up issues. Yeah, in terms of like in the sport, because you said like, why hasn't it, because anecdotally I'd been hearing about it, like why isn't it talked about? Like in the sport, I guess it's like just fear of like judgment and embarrassment and stuff, and that's probably why it hasn't been talked about.
Okay. So when you were conducting your research, then how did you do it? Like how did you try and find people, and did you find that people were more willing to do it as you thought, or was it or were people like more reluctant to like take part in it?
So like I was actually really surprised with the amount of people that I had. Like, so I put up a social media post, so on Instagram. It was a photo of me, I think it was like a comparison or something, and I put up like in the caption saying that I was doing this research on disordered eating and I wanted to find out people's experiences of disordered eating, and I wasn't necessarily looking for positive or negative experiences. I just wanted to find out people's stories of disordered eating. And I termed this, like I made it clear that this was any kind of abnormal eating pattern. So when you restrict your food intake for, say, a competition, when you like actually monitor your calories and what's going in, that's a form of disordered eating, because you're not eating in a normal way, you're not eating intuitively. Okay. So I made that clear, and I wanted to hear people's experiences of this as a powerlifter. I said that you had to be like nationally qualified, so hit like to be a certain level to participate. And the response I got was like really insane. I think I had, so I wrote down a list of all these girls that got into contact with me, and I think there was like 64 or like 60 something that got in contact with me. And I think for my study at the time, like me and my supervisor had said like, 8 to 10 participants would be good. And I thought, oh my God, like this is insane. Like I had all these girls get in contact with me and like message me. Like there were loads of girls being like, oh my God, like I can't believe you're like doing this, like this is so cool that you're like finally talking about like an issue. And I thought like what, an issue? Like this is actually like loads of people are going through disordered eating, and it's been like really negative for them, and a lot of them wanted to like finally share their story with someone because they had never like talked about it before. And I thought like this is actually like gonna be like a really positive like thing, people speaking about their experiences, and just the thought that I could like help them speak about it like made me feel like really happy and overwhelmed. And I think after like a while of like cutting it down, and like because I think when I spoke with my supervisor, she said like, wow, like 60 is amazing, but we need to get it down because there's no way you don't have the time and the manpower to interview all of those people and like transcribe everything and like analyze everything. So I think we narrowed it down to like you had to be nationally qualified and you had to have competed nationally. That got it down to like just over half, and then I contacted all of them, and basically whoever got back to me, we booked like interview days, and then there ended up being like 20 or just over 20. A few dropped out. So then I was left with like 17, and they were national and international competitors. So they had competed either nationally or internationally. They were active competitors as well, so they were still competing. And they were competing in British powerlifting, which is like the main, most popular federation there is in sport. And they were like represented a variety of like weight classes. So I had girls from like as low as 47 kilos to I think the highest was like 72 kilos, so like a range. And yeah, like I interviewed them either over Skype or like I just went to them like in a convenient location. I like traveled across England basically. I went to like loads of different cities. It was great. And like a lot of these girls I don't like know in person, like most of them I don't think I know in person. Like, they just happened to be either people who followed me or like who their friend had like recommended they do it, for example, and they had gotten in contact with me. So yeah, like the response I got was like insane. And yeah, they were really, really, really good. Obviously I couldn't have done it without them.
I was going to say as well, like the fact that you had so many people already like jump at the opportunity to do it as well probably shows that it's something that's not really addressed explicitly, but everyone wants to have like their say in it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like that's what I didn't expect. When I was thinking about the idea, I thought, yeah, it's like a cool idea, but like, is this actually like relevant to people? Like, anecdotally, I might have heard of some things, and yeah, like I might have gone through it, but like, is this actually relevant? Like, is there a need for this? And as soon as I got that response, I knew like, yeah, there's a need for this. Like, this is going to be good.
So how was the process of like interviewing them? Like, did you find it quite hard to kind of question people about, because it's quite personal as well, obviously they're eating disorders, and it seems like everyone was kind of focusing on the issue bit of it rather than the positives? So did it kind of like bring up some sort of like emotions out as well as information?
Yeah, so that, I think it's quite difficult because you have to like kind of be professional at the same time. So like I had a few that, as I was asking them questions, like got like visibly upset, so like either cried or like, you know, like took their time answering the questions, or when you can hear like their voice break or something, you think, oh fuck, like this is really hard. And you need to be like really careful, I guess, the way you word the questions and not like sound leading or like there's any judgment or whatever, and you know that there's not, but you don't want to come across that way. And it just took like a lot of preparation. Like I edited my interview guide so many times. I did a pilot interview, and yeah, it ended up being really good. I had one interview I did where the girl like stopped halfway through and didn't want to do it anymore, which is like fine, like that stuff happens. But the rest, like, they were okay with like carrying on. And like, it wasn't just negative things as well, don't get me wrong. Like a lot of, well, some of what came out was like quite positive in terms of like using the sport to like as like female empowerment and like breaking stereotypes and stuff. And I thought that stuff was really cool. But I think a lot of people focused on negative things, because if they had gone through negative experiences, for some of them this was the first time they were talking about it, so they kind of just, you know, talked about all of the negative things that they'd never like spoken about, and tried to like get all of this out because it had never been out before. And I think like that's why maybe like a lot of what I wrote, maybe it was quite like negative stories and negative experiences, but I did have like some sub themes within each theme that were quite positive, because the sport in general and how it is with like helping like body image and stuff like has been like, from the stories I heard, has been like overwhelmingly positive. It's just a lot of like the stories, it was probably like the first time they were saying them out loud, so they came across as quite negative. And like actively, like a lot of the girls, the way they were telling their stories was quite like retrospective, so these things had happened to them. They had gone through these like really shit times with food, and like times where they felt like they were really like hopeless and stuff, and they were engaging in behaviours, and like, so for some, like they were engaging in behaviours that before the sport they like might have suffered with an eating disorder, and then they entered the sport to kind of help them like get through that, but then it had like made them worse, for example. But then that was that at the time, whereas they were looking back on that, and like at the time of the interview, a lot of them had kind of like had a better relationship with food, and like were like a lot better than they were at that time in the story. So a lot of the girls were okay at the present moment. Some were still going through things, but a lot of them, like, they no longer had like issues with food.
Okay. And I was gonna ask, like, how would you like summarize what you found then with the accounts there?
Yeah, so I found a lot, like, just because, like, I think as well, because I had so many participants, everyone's stories is different. So when it came to analysing, it took me so long because I had so many things, like, I wanted to include that I thought were important, but I just didn't have the word count. But I think in summary, like, I found that there's, like, a combination of, like, unique sporting factors So things like the competitiveness, so like the Wilks ratio, so being super strong for your body weight, that caused a lot of people to want to excessively cut down. And like the culture created in the sport that is quite like male dominated, and people don't speak about issues with like food and cuts, and just like man up and power through because you're a power athlete and you have to be strong and you don't go through issues and stuff like that. Like the unique sporting factors that, with a combination of like societal factors, so like societal norms of telling you kind of what a stereotypical female should be like. So they should be like lean and petite, and like the purpose for them is to just look good. Like they have no other purpose other than that. And like being like small and lean and stuff. That contributed to disordered eating because girls felt they had to like look a certain way as well. So yeah, like those two kind of things contribute to disordered eating. I guess that's the main thing. And there's as well, like, so the title of my paper is like the beginning, weight on the bar versus weight on the scale. Like that is kind of what I made like a massive like point about in my discussion. So there's this massive clash between the weight on the bar, so like how much you can lift, as well as constantly monitoring the weight on the scale. Like there's this kind of clash, I guess, and that was the main sort of thing that I found, because girls want to be really, really strong for their sport, but at the same time I think it mainly comes from like just societal pressures of like wanting to monitor the scale, but as well like that competitiveness, because if you're in a weight class sport you're gonna like want to monitor your weight, especially if you want to be really competitive. So that's what came up a lot, like this idea of like competitiveness and being like in a smaller weight class, I guess.
Like I know within boxing and other like kind of like weight class sports as well, and I'm thinking it might happen in powerlifting, is the fact that people want to be as strong as they can but also weigh as less as they can to have like an advantage. So I don't know whether like disordered eating was also relevant to that, like whether because they're like, I have to be this weight if I want to kind of like win, I need to
that's
be there?
the thing. So like that had that is like that mentality a lot, and people mentioned that there is this kind of belief that the lighter you are, the more competitive you are, when in reality there were like quite a few girls who are like, well, that's not necessarily true, because if you commit time to like filling out your weight class and like getting stronger and like over time, you're going to be able to lift so much more than you would be at a smaller weight class. And like you're gonna just take the time to like get stronger, build muscle, and you could be so much more competitive than you would be at a smaller weight class and not progressing in your lifts, because you're holding your body back from progressing and gaining muscle, and because there's only so much you can cut. Like if you stay at a weight class, I guess like you're gonna eventually like not be able to cut anymore because you're trying to progress in the sport. But I guess it's quite different in a lot of like weight class sports. So like combat sports like boxing and stuff, it's fine because you're fighting against someone else that's the same weight, whereas in powerlifting it's like you're lifting weights, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense. So like it's harder to progress in the sport.
So in terms of like when like let's say like combat sports, so you're there to like win, to be an opponent. If you're like the same weight but you're stronger, then it's better. But if you're in powerlifting, your focus is mainly how much can I lift the most out of. So if your weight is too low, then it will kind of compromise you from lifting more weight. Okay.
As well, like I think there were like a lot of like external pressures as well, so from people around you. So social media is a really big thing, not only for like your lifts but also the way you look. So there's this like, because so powerlifting is quite a small sport, and like within this powerlifting community, like everyone's on Instagram, for example, everyone can see how much everyone else lifts, and they're able to see. So for example, people put like, oh, I lifted this at certain body weight, so then people will see that and think, oh, she can lift this at this body weight, I can lift that but I'm heavier, let me cut down, for example. Like there was a lot of like that. And there was also like body comparisons between other female lifters. So looking at like lifters in your weight class and thinking, oh, I'm not as lean as them, but we're in the same weight class, like maybe I should cut down below, because not only will I be leaner than them, but I might be stronger than them if I can maintain my lifts, like stuff like that. And I think like Instagram, like the use of Instagram, like yeah, it's great because you get to meet new people, but also it came across as quite negative because you like make comparisons against like other lifters. Yeah.
Okay. And is this like disordered eating, is that going to be a thing that kind of like transfers outside of powerlifting as well? Like or in the interviews, have you actually like experienced people saying that since I've started doing powerlifting, I've also kind of been like really strict on what I eat outside of it as well, so I can like kind of maintain this body
so like when I had this massive section on like kind of life outside powerlifting and the way it affects like kind of like maybe their social interaction. So a lot of girls, for example, like they wouldn't go out, they wouldn't like eat meals out because they were so worried about like macros and like tracking food and like like it just ruined their like social life, I guess. And even comparing their on season versus like their off season, a lot of them would be affected by, so for example, like a lot of people when they go through weight cuts, so a lot of the stories that I heard going through like weight cuts, so they'll spend maybe like a few months out from competition or like a month or a few weeks like cutting, so like restricting food intake and doing like all these like manipulations to kind of lose weight and be in their class. And then as soon as competition hits, they have this like freedom to eat whatever they want or like do whatever they want. And then from then their entire off season, like for a lot of girls, they spend binge eating, and that is like binge eating disorder is an actual eating disorder, and maybe they don't meet the criteria for a binge eating disorder, but they show the symptoms of it. And so that you could say is like the sport has caused that, because they've spent a while like dieting for the sport to get into their weight class, and now they spent their entire off season binge eating. And that, like, from a lot of the stories I heard, that happens so much. And even like hearing them speak about like their friends, and you can see it as well because on social media people post like, oh, this is my comp day food, and it's just junk. It's like crisps and cakes and like shit that they haven't eaten in months because they've deprived themselves of it, and now they finally had this freedom to eat whatever they want, and they spend like their entire off season doing it, and then they put on all this weight, and then they have to do it all over again, cut for their class, and it's just this like
like an endless like cycle of restricting then binging, then restricting and binging.
And I found that like it was really sad, but that was like quite common in the sport, and a lot of them found it like really, really hard to break. And a lot of girls, like, so there was a few that I interviewed that had just like moved up a weight class to try and like get them out of that like restriction phase. Which is, that's sad. I guess like that, I don't know if that answers your question, like that affects their life outside the sport.
Because I didn't know whether it's like a learned habit that they start to basically like take on, being like, oh, the competition's here, so as soon as competition's finished, then I'll eat as much as I can, and then go back to kind of having like disordered eating patterns. And like for a lot of them, like, so for a lot of girls I interviewed, they did have issues with like body image or had an eating disorder before the sport, and then either that had continued going into the sport, or they had recovered and then those kind of behaviours started to re-emerge again. Or for a few, which is really, really sad, like the sport caused that. So before the sport, they had never had any issues with food or body image or anything like that. And then as soon as they started cutting, like that's when it developed. Like, so there was one that to be fair, like, as well, what I should have mentioned is like coaches and stuff. So she had said that her coach wanted her to be this certain weight class. And before that, she had never like dieted and stuff, didn't really know what she was doing, didn't have a lot of guidance for it. And because of that, she kind of like restricted
too hard, and then all of a sudden she was in that kind of restriction binging cycle, which is really sad. I guess it's like the pressure of kind of like having, like, for most of the girls I interviewed, like most of their coaches were quite good. But there was just a few that had said like they kind of had that pressure from their coach to be a certain weight class, and that had kind of caused issues. Yeah.
Okay. And I was going to say, is there anything in place that you would kind of recommend for people to start doing then? Because it seems like it's quite an issue, I think, not only within powerlifting, but just general, anything that requires you restricting your calories, like in any like kind of physical sport, or let's say in like gymnastics as well, when they expect you to look in a certain way. Is there something that needs to be kind of addressed, or a strategy that can be put in place?
Yeah, I think so. This was actually a question I asked like my participants, because I wanted them to like try and come up with ways. And I think like, so some of them had said like they think it's quite good in terms of the rules in the sport, how we have 2-hour weigh-ins, especially like particularly in our federation. So you weigh in, 2 hours later you go to compete. So for a lot of people that stops them from kind of cutting hard, because I know in a lot of like combat sports or like boxing or whatever, they have like 24-hour weigh-ins. So some of them step on the scale and they're like fucking paralytic, like they can barely stand, and then they have like all that time to rehydrate, and that's why they do it. Whereas in powerlifting we don't have that. Like it's like you weigh in and you know you've only got 2 hours, so I think that stops a lot of people from like cutting even more than they do. So that was something that came up, that they think like the rules for that are quite good, the fact that we have 2-hour weigh-ins. But in terms of like at a federation level, like nothing exists. And to be honest, like I don't know what can be put in place, because the sport is quite small, there's no money in it. And in terms of like, I think it's more down to like club level, coach level. Like I think cutting shouldn't be encouraged. If you're at like a high-ish level, I'd say, like, I don't even say like do it, because I think it can be like harmful. But I think if you do it, regardless of your like level, if you do want to do it, then I think coaches need to kind of like monitor it a bit more. Like, so I think I had written in my recommendations in my discussion that I think like monitoring from coaches of like weight cuts, I think are quite good. So having like coaches attend like CPD courses, so like workshops and seminars, or have like modules. When you become a coach, you need to complete this module on awareness of disordered eating, or how to cut properly and efficiently and like in a non-harmful manner. I think coaches need to be aware of like disordered eating and the fact that it can happen, and the fact that like cuts and restrictions do cause that. Also, I think you should be encouraged to like try and maintain your on-season weight, because there are like people that literally sit like 10 kilos above their competition weight, especially for guys. Anyway, for girls, like there were some that, so there was a girl that told me she sits like 10 kilos above, and I thought like, wow, that's a lot. And she like really struggles, and she has a really, really hard time. But I think that's like it, the binges cause that. So yeah, like encouragement to maintain kind of competition weight, I think is really good, and just like more monitoring and control from coaches and like clubs. Like if you're a club president or whatever, like know who's cutting, and like put information out there that you don't need to cut. And I guess like have more role models in the sport, like talking about, like there's loads of role models, but I think having people talk about like if they've gone through like any bad cutting experiences. So some girls who were kind of sharing their stories with me, they were like, well, like I want to share this because I want people to know to like not go through what I went through, because they kind of like, I had this question like, do you regret kind of doing that? A lot of them were like, well, no, I don't regret it, because it kind of like made me who I am, or like I learned a lot from it. But at the same time, like I'm sharing this because I don't want people to go through what I went through, and I don't think people necessarily have to cut, and to like and if people are going through that, to like talk to someone about it, because it's not going to get better by yourself, and it's not like, it's okay to like talk about stuff like that. And I think like that's what my kind of the aim of my project was, like, if you're going through something like this, like talk about it, because all these other people are going through it, and the amount of messages I got, like, it makes me want to cry. I had like so many people message me like, oh, like, I thought I was the only person going through this, and after reading your stuff and after reading your blog, like, there's other girls that go through this, and I feel okay talking about it, and I feel okay like seeking help, and like going to, like, I'm gonna go to my GP and tell her, like, is there like someone I can go to and stuff like that. And like there was like girls saying like, I had no idea, like I knew what I was doing, but I didn't know it was like harmful. So it made them like more aware that the behaviours they were engaging in weren't necessarily like ones they should put themselves through. And like one girl that was saying like, oh, like, your paper reminded me like the reasons why I'm in this sport, like I'm doing it to have fun and enjoying it. And when I go through cuts and like restricting calories, I don't enjoy it. Like, I'm thinking more about what I can eat on competition day rather than my actual performance. And it shouldn't be like that. Like, if you're competing and training, you should be enjoying the process of it, and you should be enjoying competing. You shouldn't be worrying or like not having fun in the sport because you have to be in a like restrict food and like so I think okay.
So anyway, I know that is the fact that a lot of people think that they're alone, because I know you were saying that before, goes into why you wanted to do it as well, seeing if it's just you involved in the situation. But obviously from this as well, not only you, other people or other female powerlifters have actually found out that it's not just like a one thing for them, it's applied to everyone, you know, which is kind of really good that is being brought to light by what you're doing, and also kind of making it, or pushing to publish it as well.
That's it. Like, I just want to like reach as many people as possible. And I never thought like this response I got would be as big as it is. And like, it's weird because even as I was doing the research, I never put out there like, oh, I'm suffering with like food issues, or I've had an eating disorder in the past, or I'm going through recovery or whatever. Like, I never explicitly said that. All I said was, I'm doing research in this. But hearing like girls talk about what they went through, I think I'd be a bit of a hypocrite being like not wanting to talk about like my own issues, I think. And I think now I can actually say like, oh, I'm going through an eating disorder, or I'm going through recovery, because I'm telling everyone else, if you have an issue, say it. So obviously if I have an issue, say it, because I'm telling everyone else to do that. So I think it's been like positive in that way, in a selfish way, but everyone else has been helped from it, which is what I wanted. I wanted people to talk about it, and if they were going through issues, to just talk about it and know they're not alone. So I helped a lot of people with that, and not even just girls. I had a lot of guys message me about it as well, which was really good, and I didn't expect that at all. So that's what I'm thinking about, like, because I am like going through like ideas for like further research, like looking for PhDs and stuff, and if I am able to kind of like get funding, I do want to continue the kind of area, especially like in the sport, or like similar kind of like power and strength sports, because issues with food and like stuff is like really underreported, and I know it is, and like that's like really, really sad. And I think like there's scope to do more in these kind of sports. And like this project was just an example of kind of like the amount of people like that I reached. Like the first blog post I put up, I think got like 2,000 views, and like that's insane. Like I never thought it would reach that amount of people. And I know like if I continue researching it, like I can potentially try and like reach even more. I think. And
because I was thinking as well, from like the male view too, I know there's a big thing about like muscle dysmorphia.
That's kind of like there have been messages about that, and like just questions from guys like, oh, what do you think? Like, do you think there's like guys in the sport? Like, what do you think about this? And I think like, yeah, there's probably like there is a lot of issues like that. And like, I think eating disorders and disordered eating, like it is a gendered issue. Like, I think from research and stuff, you can see that like the population, the percentage of girls that go through it is a lot higher. And maybe that's because girls are more likely to report it. But I do think that also comes from like the kind of social norms of being slim, and girls are required to look a certain way, which is probably why girls experience it more. But I know that guys, obviously they experience like body image issues as well. So that would be like an interesting avenue to pursue. It would definitely be something that I'd want to look at. But it's just like, would I be able to kind of like reach that population? You know, like would I have enough willing participants to kind of talk about their like stories and stuff? I guess. But it would be like really, really interesting, and I do think it is an issue. I just don't know if I'd be able to reach that population.
I hear you. And so clearly we talk about like the bad bits that were said, well, not bad bits, but like highlighting the issues that were in the sport. And you were saying about the positives of like competitiveness, and also getting like changing the stereotypes of what like a female athlete should be like. Do you want to like talk a bit more about that? Is there anything else that you found that was quite positive as well from the experience of disordered eating?
Yes, I think like that was like my favourite kind of finding, just how many like girls are empowered by the sport and like lifting weights, and it's almost like a fuck you to society. Like, my body has a purpose now. I think like one of my favorite quotes is like, my body can like lift heavy, like, oh yeah, there are some squishy bits, but I can still lift more than your boyfriend, or like it was something like that. And it was like my favorite quote because it's kind of like almost like rebellious to kind of these societal norms that are put in place, and like the position that traditionally a woman should have, which is, you know, being worshipped for the way she looks. Like, you see it on like social media and like magazines and on TV and stuff. It's all about like the way that a woman looks, whereas the sport kind of defies that, and it's like all about what it can do and how much weight you can lift, and like maybe looking kind of ugly when you lift the weight, which is not feminine, and being involved in a sport that has all of these masculine qualities like aggression and strength, and so I think that was like my favorite finding. So like breaking these kind of stereotypical norms and focusing on what your body can do, I guess. I think that was like the main kind of positive that came from it.
Okay. And what do you think, or what do you want to happen after the research basically has been, if it does get published, which I'm pretty sure it will be anyway, but like what do you want people to kind of start considering then, or what are the kind of like implications you want the organisation to start taking into account?
I think just having an awareness that issues exist, and like treating an athlete more like, because they're an athlete, but like they're a person, like seeing them in like a holistic way, and like knowing that, especially not necessarily federation, because I don't think they'll ever do anything like, and I think most powerlifters would agree with me, because there's not much money in it. But I think like, just so if you're a coach, for example, like just treating your athlete in a holistic way, like making them feel like comfortable enough that they're able to like open up about like personal life, because personal stuff does interfere with training. Like, so girls like that go through kind of eating issues, so there was some that were saying like, oh, like So when I've made myself sick, for example, I get like really bad like acid reflux, and that, like, my belt feels really uncomfortable and it affects my training, so I won't do a training session. Or if I've binged a lot and my belt doesn't fit and like I've got all these squishy bits coming out, and I won't do my training session, or I won't post a lift on Instagram because I look really bloated from binging. Like that, like all of that stuff, like the disordered eating and the effects of it, like it affects training. So coaches need to be aware that that might happen. So yeah, like seeing them as a person, making them feel comfortable enough that they're able to open up about it, and kind of like, yeah, I guess educating themselves more on the issue, and maybe looking out for signs of the issue. Yeah, the main thing I want people to take away from it is that disordered eating happens and it's a bad thing, and maybe we shouldn't normalize weight cuts. Not like I don't think people explicitly normalize weight cuts, but I think it's just a thing that people do, and they're like, yeah, I weigh like, 64 kilos, let me cut down to 63s because it's only a kilo. Like that's a normal thing for like a lot of people, and I don't think it should be.
Yeah. Okay. And I want to, like, lastly anyway, give you the opportunity, if you wanted to share your basic like experience as well with disordered eating, if that's what you want to do, or if you're comfortable with doing that as well, because obviously it might be a bit of a touchy subject, but yeah, if you want to do that.
I guess so. So before I got into powerlifting, I think like as I was doing bodybuilding, so getting into bodybuilding, I was recovering from anorexia, and I think powerlifting like really, really helped with that, especially at the start, because I was no longer like caring about like what I looked like. So going through bodybuilding, I think like that kind of helped, because I wanted to like look a bit more muscular, and I thought, well, I need to weigh a bit more maybe to look a bit more muscular. But then I started developing this like really unhealthy obsession with like counting like all of my macros and like everything that was in my food, and like I think it's like orthorexia or something, like really kind of obsessive monitoring with things. And then I got into powerlifting, and it was like less to do with the way you looked, but more the way to do with like what your body could do. And I think that really helped me. But the fact that there were like weight classes, like that really like fucked me, because I went from trying to get out of this idea of count everything in your food and like care, like obsessively monitoring, like I would weigh myself like 4 times a day before powerlifting, and then suddenly I got into this sport that was meant to be like my savior, because it like took the focus off the way I looked and all of this excessive food monitoring. But then there were these weight classes that I had to like think about, and I think at the time I was like just over 57 kilos when I entered the sport. And then I thought like, 57 kilos, I'm like 57 point something, like let me like cut down. And that just like triggered really like old behaviours I used to engage in. And I think for a while, and I guess to some extent now, that I still like go through old behaviours, but I decided like I was moving up a weight class, which I think has really helped, because I mean the weight classes, like you kind of just have to pick one and do it, so you can't really like avoid that. But I think knowing that I don't need to worry about like what I weigh helps as well. Like I think at the time when I got into powerlifting, like everyone was like a lot of like a way of like cutting weight was monitoring macros, and I thought, oh, here we go again, like I need to start monitoring my macros to like cut weight. And I think that just exacerbated the issue. And I no longer like track macros, and that definitely helps. And I no longer am cutting for a weight class, and that definitely helps. But I think it's hard when people around you doing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's where I am now. I guess I still like struggle, and I'm an active powerlifter.
Yeah.
But I think moving up a weight class was like the best idea.
Okay.
Ever.
Yeah.
And like everyone had been telling me to go up a weight class for a very long time, like especially my coach, and everyone was like, "Oh, look, you're way too tall for your category." And I'd go to competitions and like I'd be like 5 foot. I'm just over 5'5", like 5'5.5", and like all the other 57 kilo lifters were like up to shoulder height, and I would think probably too tall for this class, and I think that's what like everyone thought.
Yeah.
And then when I finally did it, like it was at juniors, which was 3 months ago or 2 months ago. They were like, "Oh, finally," and I thought, yeah, I should have done this a while ago. Yeah, just mentally like feel a lot better, not having to worry about kind of being in a weight category. And yeah, like I'm no longer a 57 kilo lifter, and I've only I'm only like slightly above that now, but there's no point cutting down, like just sacrificing like my mental well-being and just fucking myself just so that I can be within this arbitrary fucking number that doesn't even matter. Like it doesn't matter at all. And I feel like so much stronger. And yeah, I'm like so much better than I was before, and I'm not like obsessive about weight and like food anymore. And yeah, I just think if you're a powerlifter and you're going through like a really hard time with food, just talk to someone about it, because it's the only way to like get better. And if you keep telling yourself like, oh, it's fine, like I can keep cutting to this stupid fucking number and I'll be fine and I'll get better, like once like off season hits, like I'll get better, I'll try and maintain my competition weight, but like it won't get better. Like you can't, you're not like Superman, you can't get better by yourself, especially if you're going through like a serious kind of a serious thing, or like a serious form of an eating disorder, or like disordered eating, any form of disordered eating, and it's getting like out of control and you can no longer control it. Like it's only going to get worse if you keep doing those behaviors. So you either need to like talk to someone or seek help, or I think that's kind of like what I realized, like I just need to seek help and speak to someone about it, and it really helped.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And what would you, so let's say this, you've just seen this woman or this girl really interested in starting powerlifting as well, like really wants to make some gains and strong. Like, what would be your advice to them basically coming into powerlifting from your experiences of powerlifting, not just within eating but in the sport in general? Like, what do you think your advice would be to them?
So I would say just hire a coach firstly. Hire like someone that's good, so speak to people, do your research, find a good coach. A lot of the not a lot, like some of the stories I heard, really shit coaches that don't treat their athletes like people, just treat them like an athlete, I guess, but they put so much emphasis on like and pressure on like cutting weight and stuff. So find a good coach first. You'll make gains really, really quickly. If you focus on progressively getting stronger, not caring about how much you weigh, like if you need to enter a competition, when you need to like enter it, just weigh yourself then, whatever weight you are, just enter at that weight class. Like don't even care about weight classes, and just focus on like getting strong and like progressing in your lifts and focusing on like your technique and stuff. Don't focus on cutting weight. Don't look at what everyone else is doing. Follow the right people on social media. I guess most powerlifters that I've met anyway on social media are quite good. But yeah, just have fun in the sport, like enjoy the movements and the training, and you'll make lots of friends as well, which is good.
That's good.
And yeah, I think that's the advice I would give.
Okay, lovely. And is there any last comments or remarks that you want to make as well, or anything that you're doing that you want people to kind of realise or to see or to notice, like your blog or whatever you're posting on Instagram? Or
Yeah, so I think following me on Instagram. No, you don't have to. I post what every single other powerlifter posts, training videos, which can be quite boring sometimes, but I continue doing it.
Yeah, so it's consistent.
Yeah, so it's consistent. Visit my blog, which is Psych for powerlifters it's .blogspot.co.uk, I believe.
So Psych for powerlifters.
Psych for powerlifters.
Okay.
Yeah. I've got so my disseminated findings from my dissertation are up there. So I've got kind of like an introduction one onto who I am and kind of why I decided to do this project and kind of like the reasonings behind and the journey, like the research journey that I took, and kind of I've got in different parts sort of what I found, because I had a word limit on my dissertation, and also it's like academically written, like not everyone wants to read an academic paper. So I kind of like put a blog post out there because I wanted I wanted to reach as many people as possible, and I know not many people want to read an academic paper, so I thought, why not like disseminate it for them and like put it in an easy to understand way, and like add a few more quotes, because I thought the quotes were really important from like the stories I heard, but obviously I couldn't include all of them in my actual dissertation. And if you do want a copy of my dissertation, email me, which is my name, so Luisa Vargas @hotmail.co.uk, or DM me. It's just @the.Luisa Vargas. Also, I've just done an interview with a guy who's going to be putting that article out soon. But I think I will keep like my Instagram updated for that, so people can find me on that. Okay. And yes, hopefully I can continue this research